Men's relationships with their bodies reveals the way race shapes masculinity, perhaps more than any other object of study. Black men, because of their race, never had the luxury of not having their bodies examined. Race is a bodily discourse that contends that the physical differences between groups are large enough to designate different races of people. Historically, Black bodies were viewed as ugly and inhuman and were treated as proof of their inferiority to whites. The presence of this discourse has meant that Black people's bodies, both male and female, always have been scrutinized. My main points for today is that Bobby Brown's sexual appeal wasn't about his looks. It was about his talents and the performance of a Black body and or labor. Bobby Brown's ability to captivate an audience provided him a level of acceptance in mainstream society. This objectification and or performance challenged the notions of colorism and masculinity. In one regards, he was considered the bad boy of R&B, which contributed to his appeal. On the other hand, colorism impacted how he was viewed in real life as a criminal, whom many believed to had a negative influence on the loving pop star Whitney Houston. To a degree, Bobby Brown was viewed as a thug, yet accepted in the Black community. Whitney Houston, on the other hand, had crossover success and was rejected by the Black community at large. Yet both meshed well together as a couple despite their obstacles. My overall question today is, has there been a mega pop star with Afrocentric features, hence the average-looking dark-skinned Black man, since Bobby Brown? If so, who is it? And are they just as talented? Let me know down in the comments. So Bobby Brown is an extremely talented singer and performer. And again, I do believe that while social constraints oftentimes prevent Black men from expressing masculinity in the same way as white males, this does not mean that Black men do not develop alternative ways of expressing masculinity, as stated by Cassandra Shaney and Krista D. Mency. So throughout this video, I'm going to be talking again about colorism and masculinity and how Bobby Brown managed to display his masculinity, though he was objectified, in my opinion. So dark skin and masculinity often go hand in hand, meaning that a lot of people see strength in darker skinned people, but a lot of people also don't respect darker skinned people. I like to think with the case of Bobby Brown, his performance is what made him desirable to the masses. In a way, he was objectified because he was a young, charismatic singer in a 90s boy group. When Bobby Brown came out as the bad boy of R&B, a lot of things changed. In a way, he declared his autonomy as a man with songs like My Prerogative, yet his grinding and style of confidence and how he dressed into just his personality was personified made him a bit of an object. Even though Bobby Brown wasn't the most desirable Black man, when people speak on featureism, he was a man who could woo a woman into the idea of pleasurable sex, to be honest. Despite all of that, I want to go back to how Bobby Brown evolved into who he was. And so that means starting with him being in the group New Edition. So New Edition started in 1978 when childhood friends Bobby Brown, Ricky Bell, and Michael Bivins formed a vocal group in the Orchard Park housing projects in Roxbury, Boston. They added two other friends, Corey Brackney and Travis Pettis, but they were soon replaced by Ralph Tresvant and Ronnie DeVoe. This group began performing at local talent shows and quickly gained a following. In 1981, New Edition was signed to Streetwise Records, a small label run by Maurice Starr. Starr had previously worked with New Kids on the Block, and he saw the potential in New Edition. The group's self-titled debut album was released in 1983, and it was a commercial success, spawning the hits Candy Girl and Is This the End? New Edition quickly became one of the most popular R&B groups of the 1980s. They released a string of successful albums, including New Edition in 1984, All for Love in 1985, and Heartbreak in 1988. The group also starred in the successful BET series, The New Edition Story, in 2017. New Edition's success was not without controversy. In 1986, Bobby Brown left the group to pursue a solo career. Brown was known for his rebellious personality and his struggles with addiction. His departure from New Edition was a major blow to the group, but they continued to record and perform without him. The controversy surrounding New Edition was largely centered around Bobby Brown's departure from the group, Bobby Brown's behavior often overshadowed the group's achievements. However, New Edition persevered and remained still one of the most popular and successful groups of that time. Now I'm going to go into how Bobby Brown pretty much was depicted as a solo star and as a sex symbol. For example, in the BT biopic, there was a scene of him sleeping with Janet Jackson and her wanting to pretty much keep him a secret. Again, Bobby's performance via dance on stage made him desirable to the general public or his fans, and also his overall confidence. I think that in this manner, you can kind of see the alignment between him and Janet Jackson, where she pretty much saw him as a cuddy buddy. Yet in public, he was viewed as maybe a colleague or a friend. In the biopic, it is said that her family wouldn't allow her to be with him, and colorism seemed to be the underlying issue. I think it's ironic that many of Janet's public relationships have been with light-skinned or non-Black people. Other than Jermaine Dupri, she hasn't had a dark-skinned partner. And so I'm not necessarily stating that this is absolute fact, but when I look at the Jacksons and how a lot of them have had surgeries, like kind of get rid of their Afrocentric features, and more so importantly, who Janet Jackson has decided to be in intimate relationships with and procreate with, it does seem like there is a bit of anti-Blackness there. Antonio Randolph states, Black men have been both over-identified with their bodies and denied the pleasures of it. While some physicality is desirable within American society, men who are overly associated with their bodies are seen as less civilized and thus inferior to whites. This has been most evident in popular culture and the discourse surrounding the natural giftedness of Black athletes, which ends up as a backhanded way to deny the fullness of their humanity. Black men also have been prevented from taking pleasure in the use of their bodies. This was most egregiously the case when Black men were hired out as bucks to impregnate Black women during slavery. In light of this history, it is imperative that we analyze Black male embodiment in a way that captures the specificity of their relationships with their bodies. So again, in this instance, it's talking about Black male labor as being like forced, whether it's through sports or procreation. And that's not to say that Black men don't enjoy sports or procreating, but just how a lot of times the Black body is dehumanized, especially in this particular instance, Black men. I think that when it comes to Bobby Brown, his masculinity to a degree was his like power through dance, and the money he received or the wealth and level of fame was through his performance of his body. Now I want to talk about also what's considered as fine then and fine now. I do think more so back in the 80s, 90s, and just before today, I hate to say it, the Afrocentric features were pretty much more accepted in the Black community. Like there was a higher level of consciousness on what beauty was or is. And so today, I think because of featureism, even back then, don't get me wrong, that a lot of people would consider Bobby Brown ugly because he does have Afrocentric features, which is very unfortunate. I think the color of his skin and other features that he has wouldn't make him desirable in today's time. However, Bobby Brown, even then, had confidence. You can't tell my mom, which was like her generation, that Bobby Brown wasn't fine. Yeah, nor many other women of that generation or that time frame as far as like confidence and style just being Black. I do think greatly that his talent contributed to that. I think that this talent and just this rebellious nature that Bobby Brown had allowed him to be a great solo star. And when he decided to embrace being the bad boy of R&B, he kind of skyrocketed in his field. Not only was he able to claim autonomy with songs like It's My Prerogative, but also he got to be removed from the teen bop era as the outcast and have dynamic hits and just label again or coin himself the bad boy of R&B. And so now I'm going to transition to like Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown, and again, how colorism and just the idea of masculinity impacted their relationship, in my opinion. Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown to me were like very similar. They both were extremely popular at their time. Who accepted them was a bit different. So yeah, they were marketed in Hollywood, but like I feel Bobby Brown had more acceptance within the general black population. Yet I think Whitney, as she stated, was not seen as culturally black enough.
Like 4, 5, 6, 7 consecutive #1 records. These were pop records, they were massive. She was everywhere. And to the black ear, these records were not natural R&B records. So for the black audience, the perspective was in the community that Whitney had sold out. Whitney had been nominated for either Record of the Year or Female Vocalist of the Year. When her picture came across the screen, there was this massive boom.
It's horrible. It's kind of funny. You go, are they booing me? You sit there and be like cordial and be smiling, like everything's okay, and you're feeling like, oh my God, they're not booing me, are they? Sometimes it gets down to you're not black enough for them, you're not R&B enough. You're very, very pop. The white audience have taken you away from them.
That moment of being booed on Soul Train was not only tough for Whitney, it was devastating. It was devastating. It was emotionally devastating.
And she had more white people and again, just crossover success for like her fan base. I was talking to my friend about this and he said that he believes the power of both of them to attract to different audiences was like so great that he feels that purposely people kept him high. So, when you think of people like, let's say, Michael Jackson, who was supposed to have an international crowd, and you see how influential he was. And we think of Bobby Brown, he still has the black crowd. Whitney Houston still has the white and non-white audience. And you bring that together, like they could be influential or powerful. But instead, it seemed like their addiction and just like other forces kind of separated that power. In this regards, it seems to me that they were exploited out their addiction. So they lost out on tons of money. And not to mention that their reputation was tarnished in a lot of ways. And overall, I think Bobby Brown was greatly blamed for Whitney Houston's addiction and what some people would say the loss of her voice. Bobby Brown was depicted as like this bad, black, angry man. But first, I wanted to talk more so about how they even got together and just Bobby Brown's general controversies to highlight why or how he was perceived as the bad boy of R&B. In 1989, Bobby Brown first met Whitney Houston at the Soul Train Music Awards. They began a close friendship after Houston invited Brown to her birthday party. Their friendship developed into a romance. In 1991, Bobby Brown proposed marriage to Whitney Houston, and the couple married at Houston's estate on July 18, 1992. In 1993, Bobby Brown is arrested for possession of marijuana and cocaine. In 1995, he had an incident at the Disney resorts. It says singer Bobby Brown turned himself into the biggest attraction at Disney World yesterday when he allegedly beat up a tourist and then urinated in the back of a police squad car. Orlando cops busted the husband of Whitney Houston and the two of his handlers after they allegedly assaulted a Chicago man so viciously that the victim needed 6 surgical staples, close a gash in his head, and 8 stitches to reattach his ear. Police believe that the fight may have flared when 37-year-old Neil Kelly began competing for the attention of a woman who had been talking with Brown, who's 26. The fight broke out around 1 a.m. Wednesday at Mannequin, a nightclub at Disney World's Pleasure Island Entertainment Complex, according to Deputy Carlos Espinoza. A woman who was at the bar told police that Brown had been talking with her. Kelly came up and began flirting. Brown told Kelly to take off. That started an argument. According to Espinoza, Brown claimed he didn't want to argue, turned away, and the victim spat on him. So I don't know too many people who gonna get spit on and nothing happens. So I feel like that was self-defense because being spat on is seen as an assault in itself. So anyway, in 1996, Brown is arrested for disorderly conduct after allegedly assaulting a police officer. In 1998, Brown is arrested for assault after allegedly beating a woman in a hotel room. As stated by the Chicago Tribune, singer Bobby Brown was placed under citizen arrest for investigation of misdemeanor sexual battery. Brown was taken into police custody Sunday afternoon at the Beverly Hills Hotel following a complaint by an unidentified woman. Lieutenant Joe Lombardi said, "The charge is defined as unlawful touching for the purpose of sexual arousal." Brown, husband of singer-actress Whitney Houston, denied the allegation. "I wouldn't hurt nobody. I wouldn't touch nobody," Brown said after his release from jail about 4 hours after his arrest. He posted $2,778 in bail. In 2003, Brown is arrested for battery after allegedly assaulting Whitney Houston. In 2005, Brown and Houston star in the reality show Being Bobby Brown, which documents their marriage. In 2006, Brown files for divorce from Houston. In 2007, Bobby Brown's divorce from Houston is finalized. In 2012, Bobby Brown is arrested for DUI. He was stopped and arrested for driving under the influence in Los Angeles. The R&B singer and founder of New Edition was charged with driving on a suspended license, as well as 2 Los Angeles DUI counts, including allegations that he exceeded the legal limit 0.08 BAC. In 2015, Brown's daughter, Bobby Christina Brown, is found unconscious in a bathtub and later dies. In 2016, Brown published all the things that happened to him in a memoir called Every Little Step, which he talks about his struggles with addiction and his relationship with Whitney Houston. There is tons of public opinion on Bobby Brown, and I think that overall, as Franklin suggests, Black men develop masculinity through their interaction of 3 main groups, namely their primary group, their peer group, and mainstream society. I think in general that's true. Overall, of course, I don't know Bobby Brown, but since it's my commentary, again, I think that Bobby Brown, someone who grew up in the projects, saw like music and dance as a way to escape everything. And I think that perhaps his being in the group of New Edition made him have like some idea of masculinity and brotherhood. Nothing wrong with someone going solo. Oftentimes when people do go solo, I feel like ego kind of overtakes them. I think perhaps with Bobby Brown, his ego in combination with his addiction kind of overshadowed the base of who he was. I think that a lot of times, unless like you're in Hollywood or in the moment, you don't really know how to navigate those things. I applaud Bobby Brown for like contributing to great music of the time, for being accountable for a lot of his mistakes. I don't really appreciate how the media dragged him through the mud. And again, I feel like it was because he was a Black man and Whitney Houston was so loved. But I think once we acknowledge how a lot of times Black bodies are objectified, we can understand like everything is connected and how to really form genuine relationships. Fortunately, a lot of times the youth is wasted. We don't get to value our bodies through this society or the lens of just going through the motions. I think it's like really important to be around people who care about you. I just wanted to really look at how Bobby Brown was impacted through colorism and masculinity. And so colorism is viewed within the Black community, it's still under the greater umbrella of racism. I think that once we continue to acknowledge that, we can really see like what's really going on with us and how we center in this world we live in, especially for those who just exist in the United States. So that's my commentary on Bobby Brown and masculinity. Let me know what you agree or disagree with down below. And thank you so much for listening to Books and Looks TV. I'll see y'all next time.